Erin Valenti was one of those people who seemed to have it all. She was brilliant, beautiful, and wealthy. She was the founder and executive director of her own Silicon Valley tech firm, Tinker Ventures, as well as a former venture capitalist who headed a fund of up to $20 billion. By all accounts, Erin Valenti was a rising star in Silicon Valley, which made it all the more shocking when in October 2019, Erin Valenti vanished. Among her many accomplishments, Erin Valenti earned a partnership with a neural interface startup called Control Labs, a company that had just been acquired by Facebook for somewhere between $500 million to $1 billion. This was a company that was on the cutting edge of technology, creating wearable wristbands that could allow users to control computers with their mind. On October 1st, 2019, Erin was scheduled to fly from Salt Lake City to Orange County to attend a seminar. She was supposed to stay there for 2 days, then travel to Silicon Valley to meet up with some former colleagues, then catch a return flight back to Salt Lake City on October 7th to attend the Women Tech Awards, where she was due to receive a prestigious award. But then on October 7th, things took a bizarre turn. Shortly after having dinner with a friend, Erin phoned her mother to let her know she had just finished dinner and was driving to the airport. But strangely, at first Erin told her mother that she couldn't find her car. The car was not where she remembered parking it. Erin sounded anxious, but a few minutes later she told her mother she found it and not to worry. But as Erin continued to talk, she became more agitated and began mumbling incoherently. She said several strange things to her mother, including how she had just refueled her car 10 minutes earlier. But immediately after, she also said she had run out of gas and probably wouldn't make it to the airport. Erin's mother was growing increasingly concerned, so she phoned Erin's husband, Harrison Weinstein, and told him he needed to contact her immediately. Over the next few hours, Erin continued talking to her mother and her husband, both of whom were becoming increasingly worried about the things Erin was saying. Eventually, Erin broke off all contact with them. After that, her family became unable to contact her. Erin Valenti never made it home that night. Over the next 5 days, police conducted an extensive search for her. Then on October 12th, Erin's rental car was found nearby with her lifeless body in the back seat. This was especially puzzling because Erin's car was parked only about 4 blocks away from where her last phone call came from. There was no explanation why it took the police so long to find her vehicle parked on a busy street in the middle of a crowded suburb just a few streets over from where she vanished. Even stranger still, the autopsy report could find no physical cause for Erin's death. She appeared to be healthy, and she had no drugs in her system, nor did there appear to be any other reason she lost her life. Later on, the official report would list Erin's cause of death as the result of an unexplained manic episode. It's impossible to say exactly what Erin Valenti's mental state was in her final days, or what brought about her untimely death. But there is one chilling clue that Erin told her mother at the end of her last phone call. The last words Erin ever spoke to her family open up a disturbing possibility. Right before hanging up for the last time, Erin Valenti, the computer company executive, said, "It's all a game. It's a thought experiment. We're in the Matrix." In 2003, philosopher Nick Bostrom from Oxford University published an influential paper that asked the question, is everything we think is reality actually real? For centuries, many great thinkers have asked that same question. Both the ancient Hindus and the Greeks put forth the possibility that life is but a dream. But Nick Bostrom's paper added a new modern spin to that idea. This is the possibility that everything we think is real is actually a highly advanced computer simulation, just like in the movie The Matrix. Whoa. Bostrom proposed that one of 3 possibilities must be true. This is something he refers to as the simulation trilemma. This trilemma states that 1. The human species is very likely to go extinct before reaching a post-human stage. 2. Any post-human civilization is extremely likely to run a significant number of simulations of their evolutionary history, or variations thereof. Or 3. We are almost certainly living in a computer simulation. Bostrom puts forth the possibility that there is a significant chance that humans may one day reach this post-human stage, during which they might want to run what he calls ancestor simulations. This is the idea that some distant future generation might be running an advanced computer program that simulates what life was like in what we think is the modern day. But actually, what we are experiencing is their distant past, and that all of us are just ones and zeros running inside some insanely powerful supercomputer. Taking this idea a step further, Bostrom posits that such a super advanced civilization would likely want to run many such simulations, and that those simulations would then run their own simulations, on and on down the line. Both Elon Musk and Neil deGrasse Tyson have gone on record saying that it's possible we are living in a simulation, although Elon Musk appears to be way more into the idea. He says the chances that the universe we are living in is the base reality stands somewhere around 1 in a billion. Tyson, on the other hand, hedges his bets and sets those odds closer to 50-50. But if what all these people are suggesting is true, then that would mean that as you work your way up the chain, there must be some sort of base reality where it all begins. But if that's the case, then what is in that base reality? Or rather, who? Nick Bostrom imagined a technologically advanced civilization that possessed immense computing power on a level beyond anything in what we think of as existence today. Based on our current technology, in order to generate an entire universe, such a computer would have to be gigantic and bigger than anything we can imagine. But in order to figure out how such a task of such magnitude could be computed, we should first look at modern video games. Computer programmers are able to create remarkably realistic-looking worlds in the latest video games. But in order to do so, the games that are being made require tremendous processing power to generate such realistic graphics. These graphics have gotten better by leaps and bounds since the days of Pong. Even still, no matter how immersive the game is, programmers still need to build in rules and limits. When you see some far-off horizon in a video game, the details are often kept vague and indistinct. This is done not only because that's how objects at a distance appear in real life, but also because it limits the amount of processing power necessary to render such things. And when you think about it, the universe we live in has its own rules as well. It's a universally accepted law of physics that nothing can travel faster than the speed of light, which would actually be a pretty good limit for some futuristic race to build into a simulation of life on Earth. That way, this would prevent us humans from ever reaching those faraway stars we see up in the sky. Therefore, it would make sense that there would be no need for the simulation we're living in to have to render those details either. Okay, but all this talk of living in a matrix is just a fun thought experiment, right? I mean, it makes for good science fiction, but there can't possibly be any evidence to support it. Is there? Well, actually there is. About 2,300 years ago, a renowned Chinese philosopher named Zhuangzi had a dream in which he became a butterfly flying among some flowers. But after he awoke, he had a terrifying question in his mind. Did he really wake up? Or was he actually a real butterfly who only dreamed he was a man? Simulation theory could account for just such a scenario, just as it could also account for the existence of the soul. After all, if we are to believe that the soul never dies, then this could be a sign that you're just another player in a cosmic video game waiting for someone to hit the reset button. Okay, here's another one. Have you ever experienced déjà vu? That's the strange sensation you feel when you go someplace or experience something, only to feel like you've been there before. Legendary science fiction author Philip K. Dick thought he knew the answer to this. Dick was the author of such famous books as Minority Report, A Scanner Darkly, The Man in the High Castle, and of course Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, the book that was made into Blade Runner. Toward the end of his life, Philip K. Dick came to strongly believe that we are all living in a computer-programmed simulation. Among the many things Dick spoke publicly about, he believed that déjà vu was a sign that the computer program was glitching and resetting itself. Once again, this is something we see in video games all the time. We know that computer programs sometimes have glitches and thus require patches and updates. Well, if we are living in a simulation, who is to say that whoever the simulation's programmers are, they don't occasionally need to patch this reality as well? You may have heard of the Mandela Effect. The Mandela Effect refers to a situation in which a large mass of people believes that an event occurred when it did not. The term the Mandela Effect was originally coined by paranormal researcher Fiona Broome, after she began encountering a number of people who had memories of the late Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 1980s. Only this didn't happen. Mandela actually passed away in 2013, decades after serving as the president of South Africa from 1994 to 1999. But there remain large numbers of people who distinctly recall Mandela's funeral being televised, nearly 3 decades before it really happened. And this isn't the only such Mandela Effect event people recall. Do you remember eating Jiffy peanut butter as a kid? Well, you didn't, because there's never been any such product. How about Curious George having a tail? Nope, he doesn't. Do you remember the Fruit of the Loom logo having a cornucopia? It doesn't, and it never did. What about Ed McMahon handing families giant checks for Publishers Clearinghouse on TV? Even though you might strongly recall McMahon doing this, he never did. In fact, he was never a spokesman for that company. Instead, he worked for American Family Publishers. Or how about the famous line Darth Vader says in The Empire Strikes Back? Luke, I am your father. Except Darth Vader never said this either. The real line is, no, I am your father. There are hundreds of these Mandela Effect examples I can list. The most common explanation that these are all just examples of our very human and very fallible memories. Our brains are complex machines and memories become jumbled and confused over time. But some believers in the simulation theory have proposed that these Mandela effects are actually moments where the computer code has been rewritten. Only for some reason, some people still remember things the way they were. These things all make for some interesting theories. But is there any other proof that the simulation is real? Well, maybe. Check this out. Or this. Or how about this? There are many such videos you can find on the internet where reality just plain doesn't seem right. Now, if any of these clips were scenes out of a video game, you'd say the game was glitching. But this is supposed to be the real world. But faulty memory and strange videos on the internet aren't enough proof for actual scientists and mathematicians. But that's okay, because there are a number of scientists and mathematicians who have put forth what they see as actual evidence we are living in a simulation. Max Tegmark is a cosmologist at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and he points to the fact that the universe appears to be based on mathematical laws as the best evidence of simulation theory. Laws that function more like the rules of a computer game. In Tegmark's view, the mathematical laws that govern our universe are probably not the only ones possible. It's possible that if we are in just one of many simulations being run at the same time, then these other universes would have their own different mathematical laws that only applied there. James Gates, a theoretical physicist at the University of Maryland, said in an interview in Scientific American that he would like to simply write off people like Max Tegmark as crazy. But even he can't explain why he keeps coming across what appears to be error-correcting computer code while researching quarks, electrons, and supersymmetry. But not all scientists are in agreement. Lisa Randall, a theoretical physicist at Harvard, thinks the odds that we are living in a simulation stands at just about 0. Randall can't wrap her head around why anyone would even bother trying to simulate us. But this kind of thinking ignores the popularity of video games like The Sims or Civilization. The fact is, people, or at least we simulated humans, love role-playing as other people. Or maybe that's just how we're programmed to think. Michio Kaku, the famous theoretical physicist, doesn't believe in the simulation theory. That's because he says based on current technology, there simply aren't enough atoms in the universe to build the RAM necessary to create such a massive simulation. Okay, but going back to what we discussed earlier, in that case, maybe we don't generate the entire universe all at once. Maybe you are the only real player in this fictional universe, and the simulation only needs enough processing power to generate the data you can see or feel. And the parts of the universe that you can't see, never get rendered until you need them. Probably one of the biggest pieces of evidence that simulation theory is real is the simple fact that no one can disprove it. But that's a double-edged sword because at the same time, there's no conclusive evidence to prove it either. One place we can look for evidence that we are all living in a simulation comes to us from quantum physics. One of the most well-documented physics experiments ever conducted is the double slit experiment. The double slit is a cornerstone of quantum physics, revealing the fundamental nature of particles and the strange behavior they exhibit on a quantum scale. In 1801, Thomas Young became the first person to conduct a version of this experiment. Ever since, the double slit experiment has become one of the most iconic and perplexing demonstrations of quantum mechanics. At its core, the double slit experiment investigates the dual nature of particles, which can exhibit both particle-like and wave-like properties. This duality is a central concept in quantum mechanics, where particles like electrons, protons, and even larger molecules can behave like both tiny particles and waves of probability. The setup of the experiment is relatively simple. Imagine a barrier with two narrow slits cut into it. Behind this barrier, there's a screen where particles, typically electrons or photons, are directed. When these particles are shot toward the barrier with the two slits, they should behave as particles, each traveling through one of the slits and hitting the screen directly behind the slits, creating two distinct bands. However, the truly mind-bending part of the experiment comes when we observe what happens when particles are sent through the slits one at a time. Instead of producing two bands as expected, they generate an interference pattern on the screen. This pattern resembles the kind of pattern you'd see if you were to shine light through two slits onto a wall, resulting in a series of alternating light and dark bands. This interference pattern suggests that the particles are behaving as waves, not particles. Waves exhibit interference patterns when they overlap. And this is exactly what's happening here. Each particle is behaving as a wave of probability, passing through both slits simultaneously, and interfering with itself. As a result, when these waves overlap on the screen, they create an interference pattern. The mystery deepens when we introduce the element of observation. When we try to determine which slit a particle passes through, by placing detectors or measuring devices at the slits, something extraordinary happens. The interference pattern disappears, and the particles start behaving like individual particles again, forming two distinct bands on the screen. This phenomenon is known as the collapse of the wave function. It suggests that the act of measurement or observation somehow forces the particle to choose a definite state, either behaving as a particle or a wave, but not both simultaneously. There have been many theories put forth why the particles would behave this way. One potential explanation that's been put forth by proponents of simulation theory is that there is some higher power working behind the scenes to make the particles act this way. That's because one of the only ways you can make sense of the particles behaving in such a manner is that there must be some invisible hand that allows them to defy the laws of physics as we know them. Simulation theory also provides an interesting explanation for all sorts of paranormal phenomena. Ghosts? Maybe they're not disembodied spirits. They're glitches in the program, or even non-player characters that haven't fully loaded. UFOs are another example. Maybe they don't obey the laws of physics because they're programmed not to. The oddities surrounding the double slit experiment make a compelling case that there may be some advanced supercomputer programmer calling the shots behind the scenes. You can even describe this super programmer who exists outside of space and time as God, which opens its own philosophical and religious can of worms. At the same time, there's a lot about quantum mechanics that throws a monkey wrench into the simulation hypothesis. You see, if this reality were indeed a simulation, it would imply that the creators went out of their way to make so many other aspects of quantum mechanics appear as inherently random as possible. It's sort of like simulating a game of dice, but secretly rigging them to roll differently each time. The principle of Occam's razor advises us to prefer the simplest explanation that fits the facts. In the case of simulation hypothesis, sure, it's technically possible. But proposing that we're living in a simulation created by superintelligent beings introduces more complexity than it eliminates. Imagine if you discovered that your life's purpose was just to entertain some cosmic gamer. It's not exactly a flattering picture of deities or advanced beings. Most of us would prefer to believe in gods who have better things to do than watch us bumble through our existence, whether it's mundane tasks or existential crises. This also opens the door for some major ethical quandaries. If we are all characters in some cosmic video game, what does that say about ethics? Are the beings running the simulation responsible for our suffering? Can we hold them accountable for our poor life choices? It's a philosophical minefield that challenges our very notions of morality. Let's face it, if we are living in a simulation, then it sure seems like some alien kid from the future is messing with the fabric of society to see how far they can push things. From the pandemic to politics to wars being fought all around the world, it can sometimes feel like everything is breaking down around us. This also takes the matter of free will out of our hands. This is an age-old belief that dates back to the Calvinists, that we humans are all just puppets following God's predestined plan for us all. In many ways, the simulation hypothesis is just a substitute for these same religious arguments. For after all, who would this alien computer programmer who's in charge of everything and who can reprogram us in an instant be, other than God? But to believe in the simulation hypothesis, it means you have to give up on your sense of autonomy. After all, if life is just one big video game, then why bother trying to change things? Why should any of us make an effort to improve the world and fix the problems we have? It's a choice between accepting that the world is the way it is because we made it that way, and taking the steps needed to make things better, or just waiting around for it all to collapse, and hoping the big computer programmer in the sky finally hits the reset switch. Thank you so much for checking out this video. If you like this content and want to see other videos like it, subscribe and click the bell icon to be notified when new videos are posted.